Tonight I'm joined by Dr Melissa Rogerson, who is a lecturer at the University of Melbourne. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about your position and some of the work you do?
Yeah, so I'm a lecturer in human-computer interaction. So we're interested in the way that people and technologies interact, but the technology that I'm interested in is board games. So in my role, I do teaching. I do a lot of teaching around evaluation, so how we understand whether something is a good system to use. And of course, that can be a game as well as a computer system or an app. But my research is generally focused on board games and more broadly, I suppose, on tabletop play.
So what drew you to that being an area of research?
Well, I've been playing games all my life, right? I've been going to game conventions and game events for 40 years. I met my husband at my first games event that I went to, and I've made so many friends through playing games. So gaming is very much something that I'm interested in. In my professional life, I was working in the area of usability, so understanding the way that people use systems, and that sort of all came together nicely into this. Well, what if we studied the way that people use board games?
What can you tell me about the way people use board games?
Sure. So most of my research has been with hobbyist board gamers, so people who really love playing board games. Part of that is just, it's really hard to find someone who doesn't like board games, who's willing to come in and talk to me for half an hour about why they don't like board games. If there's anyone like that watching this show, please reach out. But so I've done a lot of work with hobbyist board gamers, long interviews, watching people play games. And one of the things that came out really strongly is that there's 4 things that attract people to playing games. And I'm going to lead with a spoiler. None of them is they're not digital, which is something that people often think. But actually, if you think about something not being digital, well, you might be gardening, or you might be riding a bike, or you might be reading, or you might be cooking. All of those things are not digital as well. So what is it about games that makes us enjoy them so much? The 4 things that people keep coming back to time and time again, first of all, are the sociality, right? Playing games is social. You're sitting around a table, you're interacting with people while you play. There's intellectual challenge. A lot of the people that I've interviewed talk about, sometimes I just want to kind of veg out in front of the television, but sometimes I want to think. I want to engage my brain. I want to be doing something while I'm playing. So they really enjoy that active kind of thinking, puzzling things out. The materiality of the game is really important. And by that I mean the physicality of the game, right, that it's made of things, but also that we leave traces. Some people like to sleeve their cards, for example, to keep their game kind of looking as perfect as they can. Some people like those signs of wear and tear. We call those use histories, right? The idea that you can look at a card and see that it's been played and see maybe that game has been loved, see the old score sheets inside the box.
So the fact that it's not digital is not necessarily the draw card for board games, but the physical elements of a board game are still something that attracts people.
Super important, that's right. And the 4th thing is just variety, right? We can sit here and we can say, let's play something quick. Let's play something that'll take us a few hours. Let's play something with cards. Let's play something where we're going to talk a lot. Let's play something that's going to be really quite strategic and thinky.
So we've looked at some of those 4 elements. So then if we're going to sort of break that down into you personally, is there games that you love or you love playing that you can recognise some of those elements that attract you to those games?
Yeah, and interestingly, they're kind of not always the games that I would expect to like. I love Terraforming Mars, which is a huge game, and it takes hours. My husband and I play it as a 2-player game, and we'll often run 5 or 6 hour games when we've got all the expansions and all the pieces. And for me, I sometimes think, well, isn't that really fiddly? Don't you like a bit of elegance in a game? But actually, there's just something about having all the pieces on the table and all the bits, and the game never plays quite the same way each time. At the other end, I've got a game called Dirty Pig, which comes from Germany. It's a little card game where you're trying to get your pigs muddy and you're trying to make it rain so your opponent's pigs are clean, right? And then you try to make a little pig house so that your pigs won't get rained on. it's really, really silly. But that's got that real sort of social element to it of you're constantly laughing, you're constantly sitting there saying, dirty pig, dirty pig. And it's very, very engaging, very enjoyable.
So I guess when you were talking about those 4 elements, variability, and we were sort of referring to different games, is the variability in gameplay for a certain game, that each game can be different, is also another thing that should attract people.
Absolutely, yeah. So these things work on lots of different levels. Being able to choose from lots of different games and pick the right game. When you talk to people, it's always about picking the right game for the group. How many people have we got coming? How long do we want to spend? Is it going to be a chatty night? Finding the perfect game for that group is really important. And when you see people talking about managing their game collection, they often talk about, I don't have, I'm making this up, right? I don't have a deck builder for 6 players and I feel like that's a gap in my collection. And so you see this really conscious kind of curation of the variety in the collection.
Because it does seem like board game, we've talked about this a little bit with our group, is we've got 2 of us who are sort of a bit more into collecting. We've got another guy who feels bad he doesn't own games. We're like, it's fine. We have a lot of games. We're happy for you to play them. And it's perfectly valid to be a big board game fan and not own a single board game.
Oh, absolutely. And it's about, I suppose, another kind of variety, which is variety in the ways that we enjoy playing games. Right? Some people like playing games on their own, solo games. Some people like playing games with their family or with particular friends in their homes. Some people like going out to clubs and to conventions. And I think that's one of the great things about playing board games, is that we have that choice.
Can you tell me a little bit about board game academia in Australia and the rest of the world?
Yeah, so there's not a huge amount of board game academia, and most of the people that are studying board games are really looking at cultural elements. So they're looking at really important questions like the way that people are represented in games or not represented in games, or the stories that games are telling and are sort of reifying and making us play out over and over again. And that's really, really important work. There's also a lot of academic work on the history of games. So, we've found these, I think there was an article in the paper recently, they found some balls on an archaeological dig in the Aegean, and some of them looked like they were artificial, so they sort of hypothesised that maybe they were a game. Or you can look at the work by someone like Irving Finkel at the British Museum, who's worked out how to play games like the Royal Game of Ur by going back to cuneiform tablets and looking at what people had written. So lots of kind of historical work on games. Lots of work on, or a reasonable amount of work, I suppose, on the cultural role of games in our lives, and much less work, I think, on the interactions that people have when they're playing a game. So we're really, at my group, are really the only people in Australia that are looking at that, I think.
So what you're saying is, what I'm hearing is, you're doing important work that definitely should get funded.
Definitely, yes. Any funders out there, hi.
Having read a couple of your papers in preparation, there's definitely a lot of interesting and engaging elements you were talking about, which you've discussed here, with like the 4 types or 4 tenets of what attracts people to games. And I wish you all the best for your research in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you
you.
for having me.